What's going on, everybody? Anthony Cervino here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel with my top players we should be buying, selling, and holding entering fantasy football week 8. Let's start with the first buy. That's Malik Nabers. Now I get it. Malik Nabers coming off 2 games in which he did not play. Then he puts up a dud in week 7 against Philadelphia. Targeted 8 times, only catching 4 for 41. The Giants' offense, the Giants' passing attack, it did not look the same without Andrew Thomas. I think that sets back Daniel Jones, and we did see Drew Lock. Immediately, I do think the trigger reaction is to sell Malik Nabers. He's a player instead I want to buy. We might be able to get him at a discount because it has been 3 weeks since we last saw Malik Nabers pop for over 20 fantasy points, which he did from a weeks 2 to 4 span. He's all the Giants have. They have some nice pieces: Wan'Dale Robinson, Slayton, Tyrone Tracy, Singletary. But Malik Nabers is an emerging superstar in the league. And while he did struggle in what looked like an easy matchup on paper against the Philadelphia Eagles, let's face it, the Eagles have owned the New York Giants in recent memory. Next up, Malik Nabers gets Pittsburgh. This is a defense that looks good on paper. They pass the eye test a lot of the times, but we've seen wide receivers put up some production on this secondary this year. They get Washington, they get Carolina, and then coming out of the bye, Tampa, Dallas, Baltimore, Atlanta, then the fantasy championship, Indy. With that type of rest of season schedule, I will take the risk of getting the bad version of Daniel Jones for the rest of the way for that potential pop ceiling of Malik Nabers on a week-to-week basis. The next player I am buying is Devin Achane. I get it, folks. Devin Achane has put us through the ringer all year long. So has every other offensive player on the Miami Dolphins since the Tua injury. It's been bad since opening the year with back-to-back games at over 23 PPR points. It's been all downhill. In fact, last week against Indy, 10.5 PPR points, 15 for 77 on the ground, 2 of 3 targets for 8 yards. That's been Devin Achane's best outing since Tua got hurt. The good news, the reinforcements are coming. Tua is expected to play, barring any setbacks, as soon as week 8. He's already been designated to return from IR. And if Tua returns to a shell of the player we know he can be and we know he has been in this offense, the rest of this offense, in theory, should fall back into place. And this is another guy in Devin Achane. He has a dream schedule upcoming: Arizona, Buffalo, the Rams, Vegas, the Patriots. This is a nice run of teams where Devin Achane can return to form and get us big-time fantasy production. Some fantasy managers who have Achane right now, they might be done with him. They see the passing attack opening back up. They see Mostert's back healthy. They know Jayden Wright could also be in the mix. Maybe they don't trust the situation, which means this is the time for you to swoop in and scoop Devin Achane up. Next, the final buy, Chris Olave, and this is another one. He hasn't really given us much outside of a 3-game span from weeks 2 to 4, in which he gave us 12.8, 20.6, and 16.7 PPR points. Chris Olave looks like one of the biggest duds in fantasy football. A big reason why is that, shockingly, Rashid Shaheed emerged as a big-time wide receiver threat on his football team. He emerged as more than a best ball draft target. Rashid Shaheed was getting volume, and he was taking away from Chris Olave. That all changes. We know Rashid Shaheed, he's done for the year. And when Chris Olave returns from his concussion, it is really safe to say he is going to emerge as a target vacuum on this football team. Olave has only had one game this year with more than 6 targets. And when we got that in week 4 against the Falcons, he gave us over 16 PPR points. We know what Chris Olave can do when getting the volume. He is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. This offense does, in theory, look better with Kubiak. It's just a matter of, is Chris Olave finally going to get his opportunity when everything is right with his health and Derek Carr's health? If you're willing to buy into potential upside and ceiling that we know is there with Chris Olave, then he could potentially be a locked and loaded wide receiver 2 rest of season on your fantasy football team. He has a couple of speed bumps upcoming, like the Chargers this week. The Chargers are a very difficult matchup, but this is why you buy him now, because the expectations, if he does play, is that he's going to probably put up a dud. You don't wait until ahead of Carolina or Atlanta to buy in. You buy when his value is potentially at the lowest, and that could be and probably is right now ahead of this Chargers game in week 8. Remember, folks, if you like content like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the alert icon so you can be notified anytime we go live to answer your questions or drop amazing videos just like this. If you have start-sit questions, trade questions, waiver wire questions, ask them in the comment section of this video. We will get back to you as soon as we can. Now, let's go to a couple of players we are selling. Number 1 is Alvin Kamara. We're going to stay with the Saints, folks. Alvin Kamara, he's been on a downward spiral. He popped the first couple games of the year, 3 out of 4 games, over 22 PPR points, hitting that 44-point ceiling week 2 against Dallas. He has gone under 17.4 in each of his past 3, and that was the high note. 12 and 8.4 were his other 2 games. And now you get the Chargers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Cleveland Browns. 3 top 9 defenses when it comes to fantasy points conceded to running backs in your next 4 games. Sure, you get Carolina in one spot in there, and he probably goes off in that one. But those other 3 surrounding games going into the bye, they have to scare you, especially on this team. Again, they're losing weapons left and right. They're hoping to get Olave back. They're hoping to get Carr back. This offense looks anemic without their normal playmakers, and the enemy defense is going to say, hey, Alvin Kamara, we're going to stack the box. We're going to try to let you run on us when we know your best receiving weapon without Chris Olave is Bub Means. And even when Chris Olave is back, this is a very easy offense for an enemy defensive coordinator to game plan against. Now, if you are moving Kamara, you are running the risk that he gets traded to a contender and sees a better situation, but that is a risk I am willing to take for a 29-year-old running back, probably on the decline. Let's go to another runner I am selling. I'm going to stay in that division, and that's Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard has been an amazing story this year. He has more than returned fantasy value on his draft position on one of the worst teams in recent memory. However, this is another player going in the wrong direction. Since popping for 22 fantasy points in week 4, he has gone under 19, 15, and now last week 11. This offense last week against Washington, it did not look good, and it's not like this is a Dan Quinn defense with studs everywhere. He's doing the best he can, and it's an ascending defense, but they really did a great job limiting Andy Dalton and company, who has been pretty good. Now, it doesn't get any better. You get the Denver Broncos this week. You get the Giants in week 10. Coming out of the bye, Kansas City, teams like Philly. And oh, by the way, somebody named Jonathan Brooks is really close to returning, which really could put a dagger in the fantasy value of Chuba Hubbard. I'm trying to move off of Chuba Hubbard now. Maybe another fantasy manager sees, hey, they get the Saints in week 9. That's an easy matchup. Let me take Chuba Hubbard now. Let me get what I can. Maybe they don't activate Brooks. We don't know. Chuba Hubbard, with all of these red flags beginning to pile up, I get he's been terrific, and he's probably helped you win games. But I would try to flip him now before Jonathan Brooks comes and before the schedule gets more difficult. Let's go to players I am holding. Number 1 is Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed, we know he is the guy on this offense. We know that Jordan Love plays outstanding football. He's a gunslinger. He's going to throw multiple touchdowns a game almost every week. And a lot of the times, Jayden Reed's going to be at the other end of one of them. But Jayden Reed, kind of quiet, past 3 games, under 14.8 PPR points, including a low 3 PPR point outing this week against Houston. He only was targeted 4 times last week. In fact, he's been held under 6 targets in 3 straight games. Fantasy managers might want to move off of Jayden Reed. Christian Watson's healthy. Romeo Doubs is coming on. Wicks is healthy. This is a loaded offense. Plus, you got Kraft, who's an ascending young tight end. We know that Jordan Love likes to spread the ball around like a point guard. But what we also know is that when everything's clicking, that Jayden Reed can put up these monster fantasy outings. And outside of Christian Watson, I don't think there's another wide receiver on this football team that is capable for popping over 25 PPR points at will like Jayden Reed. He also has the rushing versatility. He's had at least 1 carry in every game, and we've known him to break them open and take them to the house. Jayden Reed is too talented, and he's attached to one of the best offenses in the NFL for me to want to sell Jayden Reed. He is a player I'm going to hold, and I'm going to wait it out because he has some terrific matchups upcoming. Jacksonville, Detroit, that are going to be get-right matchups heading into the bye. Let's close out with George Pickens. If you're not buying George Pickens, you're not moving off of George Pickens. I get it. He looks like a sell high. He went off against a tough defense against the Jets. Russell Wilson was fresh. Maybe you don't trust Russell Wilson. Let me tell you a story. I have a lot of George Pickens shares. I play in a lot of leagues. I bought into George Pickens all offseason with the assumption that Russell Wilson was going to be the QB1 all year. I was buying into the fact that Russell Wilson, he has some deficiencies now. He is still a terrific deep ball passer. Last season in Denver, I believe he had somewhere around a 26 to 8-ish touchdown to interception ratio. It wasn't all that bad. This is a better offense, more pieces, run first, play action. This plays into the strengths of Russell Wilson and George Pickens. And we saw that against a talented Jets defense on national television. I don't think it's a coincidence that George Pickens played. I get he popped in week 4 against Indy, but this was his best game of the year in terms of an NFL wide receiver going up there, contested catches, drawing PIs. This offense is going to click differently with Russell Wilson, and George Pickens, who had 9 targets in game 1 with Russ, is going to be the main benefactor of this quarterback change. We are holding